could the directive actually provide a boost to the offshore funds industry and offshore investment managers?
I think it actually could. I think there's a lot of opportunity there for places like Jersey. As Brendan's explained, we're very well placed to meet equivalent standards, I think, immediately. And if the directive is successful in introducing an EU-wide passport, I think that could open up access beyond the current private placement regimes. Equally, if certain fund groups who operate in the European space but don't have such a great footprint of EU business decide they want to run either a parallel rest of the world model or decide not to engage in the EU, our proximate location to the city, to the financial machinery of Europe, would allow them to create a rest of the world capability effectively based in Jersey. And we've certainly seen a noticeable uptick in inquiries from fund managers based in the UK in terms of possibly relocating to Jersey. I think there are a variety of reasons for that. It's not just the directive, but it's one consideration that the current climate in the UK and the taxation environment, I think, is probably the strongest driver.
Do you feel as though you're sort of being asked to join a club that you don't really want to be a member of?
Well, we've always had a stated intention and objective of meeting the highest international standards, and I think we've got the credentials and evidence to justify that claim. We are the most successful jurisdiction ever in terms of the IMF FSAP assessments. And that just doesn't come by accident. It takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of right legislative framework.
As Charlie was implying in his talk, that the origins of this are not necessarily what the end result's going to be. And as Charlie was saying, that crisis didn't necessarily come from where the majority of people thought it did. Thus, you're getting caught up in a mishmash, basically.
Well, I don't think it's surprising that, given the dislocation to the world's financial system, that all major blocs, countries are looking hard at regulation. I don't think that's surprising at all. I think it's quite to be understood. And to a degree, I think it's unwise to try and fight against it because we've had the world on the brink of the financial system failing. So it's hardly surprising that governments and regulators are taking a serious look at any industry that's big enough to pose a systemic risk. And the private equity and hedge fund industry didn't cause any problems in the crisis, but it is big enough to be of systemic importance. So I wouldn't rail against the fact that it's being reviewed. My only regret is the pace and speed at which this directive has been introduced. I think having 1,700 amendments tabled is a testament to the fact that maybe it wasn't thought through as well as we might ideally have liked at launch. But there was a tremendous amount of pressure from the G20 and others. All G20 nations went away from the April 2009 G20 with a commitment to undertake a full financial sector assessment. And this is one of the outcomes.
One of the plus, leaving aside the negatives that we well aired about the origins of the directive, etc., one of the big pluses about the directive was that it was going to allow the passport. And that of itself, if it went through just as it was, would be a big plus for Europe as such. But you must remember the current politics situation, as I understand them now, having gone 7 weeks today, is that the two things have happened. The Spanish presidency put down a compromise text before I finished, the effect of which would be that the passport idea would be derailed because it would allow, the Spanish compromise allowed national discretion in this particular area. So the effect of that would be that most of the member states, I would guess, wouldn't exercise the national discretion and therefore would be very unbalanced market throughout Europe. That was the Spanish presidency text and compromise which was on the table. As regards that, I understand the rapporteur in the European Parliament are more inclined to the Commission's original position. I understand many of the member states in the Council would be somewhat inclined to the Spanish compromise. And what has happened, secondly, the big thing has happened, as I understand it from my contacts in Europe and signalled in some of the press, that this whole debate in this area in the Council of Ministers has been put back until after the UK election, which brings into focus a subsidiary question that you asked kind of Brendan. And so what's going to be the position vis-a-vis the UK election and what's going to happen then. So therefore there are those things to consider. My own experience in Europe has been that when there are lots of big issues like this around the table, a compromise will be arrived at in the end, and I wouldn't rule out the fact that it could be gone through before the 30th of June, because the Spanish have said they'd like to have this tick on their box done, and the pressure will come to find an effective compromise. And those industries should be well attuned that sometimes those last-minute compromises brings in the law definitely of unintended consequences. So I wouldn't rule it out. As to the position regarding the G20, that could happen. Yes, because they could say, well, one jurisdiction is going ahead. But remember, the G20 as such does not have decision-making powers. This is a European competence. And Europe is going, in my view, is going to move ahead in this particular area, irrespective of the rest of the globe, rightly or wrongly. So I wouldn't rule out that this could be done by the 30th of June. But there are a number of factors at play here, and in the final compromise, I've seen all types of good compromises reached, and equally I've seen a lot of nonsensical compromises reached as well.
Yeah, I think the G20 could put it back on track, because what we started off with was a continuation of the status quo, the private placement regime from the council, and then we've put the passport back on the table. As a result, they've tried to load regulation on top of the private placement regime. I think the G20 will say, no, that has elements that could be interpreted as protectionist, and as a result will give a steer to try and keep this as friendly and as reasonable as possible without those interpretations with the US. And so I think we will probably go back to the position where it's decided that the leap to the passport was just too quick, too fast, too soon, and we'll end up something along the lines of a European passport initially with a private placement regime continuing, but then with an opportunity either for a review after a period of years or a transitional period that will allow us to become equivalent and obtain a passport in short order.
That's possible, yes.
Charlie, is there, do you sense, I mean, I know you're outside now, but you obviously still keep your contacts. That's only February since you left. Do you sense there is any, not antagonism, but perhaps resistance from the Commission to Jersey remaining or getting its equivalence if its third country status were to remain?
Well, my belief at all times has been is that the Commission, as if a Commission has a view, like I'm not given to the belief that that commissions have a view. There are 20,000 civil servants in the exact Commission. Like it depends what element of that. I'd say within certain elements of the Commission, there are certainly people who would be of the view that you just outlined, maybe keep those out. But there is not a coherent response to say this is not the way the situation should be. But Commission responds to the attitudes of member states, and there would be, whether I like it and I certainly don't, an attitude about any jurisdiction, like such as Ireland, the state I know best, who has a low corporate tax regime. There are attitudes in the minds of many civil servants in the Commission, and even though it's not formalised in the form, expressed the way I'm expressing it now, it does underpin some of their activities. But there is not a strong view, but except that people, like as you rightly, like, even I wouldn't, and I'd be a strong defender of competence in taxation. Yeah. Even I wouldn't have been aware that 44 of the 47 recommendations Jersey complies with, and UK is only 30, and Ireland is only 30, Luxembourg is only 10. I wouldn't have been aware of that, and I don't mind little wager now and again. I wouldn't mind. I'd say that there are very few people in Europe know that as well. So there's something that you could sell.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely right. And I think this period now, till the 27th of April, is a critical period for us where we do need to be in Brussels regularly informing, educating. Over the last, since 2002, we entered the OECD Tax Information Exchange Agreement Programme voluntarily in 2002. It got a lot of profile at the April G20, where a number of jurisdictions were coerced into joining that to get on a whitelist. We entered voluntarily 6 years before. So we've been engaged bilaterally with many countries, including the big players in Europe. We have a tax information exchange agreement signed with France, just awaiting parliamentary ratification. We have a signed, I think, active agreement with Germany, with the Netherlands. We've got live dialogue and debate with Belgium about signing a tier and possibly a DTA as well. So if you took the, we have agreements exchanged and under discussion negotiation with Italy and Spain. So we have a lot of bilateral communication going on where we've demonstrated that we're actually a very soundly and well-regulated jurisdiction. We want to engage with the major European nations as an extremely important market to us. And we believe we can be a very valuable capital conduit for those big nations.
I'm sure that's true, but the fact is that the European Commission isn't there for not there for Jersey, it's there for the European Commission. Don't you have any fears at all that they're trying to close Jersey down as an international financial centre?
No, I don't think that's the intention at all. I think it's the directive is a reaction to the crisis, and I think the motivation is to get stronger regulation in place. Some of that has been influenced by particular political groups, I think particularly the socialist MEPs in Parliament, where Charlie sort of rehearsed, the value of sound bites where you're kind of kicking the rich or kicking business. But I think outside of that kind of group, I don't believe generally in the Commission staffed with civil servants there's any sort of subplot or subtext that says, let's get third countries, let's get Jersey. And the EU and the G20 have vowed not to enter into protectionist measures. So I think that's ground that we need to stand on and campaign on.
There's no doubt that jurisdictions around the world want to close down jurisdictions which launder money, which are secrecy jurisdictions.
Or do it better than themselves.
But obviously that is their first priority. And Jersey has had a good crisis because this whole debate has come out in the open, and all of the third-party reviews we've had by those who sort of police the international finance community have come out, inspected us, and given us first-rate reports. And I think there's no better illustration of that than the fact that France just recently announced their own list, their own blacklist of non-cooperative jurisdictions, and Jersey isn't on it. So at the political level, at the governmental level, France is recognising that Jersey is a quality jurisdiction. There is absolutely no doubt that the officials that we deal with on a day-to-day basis in terms of working with them at the supervisory level and at the government level understand that Jersey is an open, transparent, and cooperative jurisdiction. So I don't see any of those problems. And I think all of that is best summarised, not least by recently people like Ugo Bassi from within the Commission, who used to be one of Charlie's lieutenants and is leading this dossier, and also Jean-Paul Gauzès, the rapporteur on this, have both in public fora said Jersey, the Channel Islands, we expect those to be equivalent. So we're happy with the process and them being involved in